What's going on? Welcome to Shrek Gaming, and today we're actually going to do things a little bit differently this time. We're going to watch the interview between Kanon and Greg Street, also known as Nightcrawler, who is the creative director for the upcoming Riot MMO. And always like, subscribe, comment down below, tell me what you guys think, and without further ado, let's get after it.
Right. I do want to talk to you about monetization, but before I ask that question, what do you think separates games like WoW and Final Fantasy 14 from the others that just don't make it? Like, what is it about them? I mean, is it just the budget? Is it the creative design that's behind it? Is it a team that's running it? I mean, it could be multiple things, but it just... you know, there's plenty of good ideas, and there's plenty of, I'm sure every MMO that comes out, it's like, hey, we feel like we can do this better. And I love the fact that when we talked earlier, you're talking about, hey, I think one of the things that Riot does very well is they look at games like Dota and think, hey, maybe we could do this better by doing this and this, and they've just had they've had solid success with that. I'm sure that's the mindset with a lot of MMO developers, but they still just don't make it. Like, I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
I feel like Dota was a little bit different because the people who made League of Legends, they were huge fans of the original Dota, and League was kind of a spawn off of that. The one thing I will say that in the late 2000s and early 2010s, that a lot of the MMOs that came out were always trying to be like the WoW killer, or we can do this better than WoW. And I feel like Final Fantasy 14 and World of Warcraft kind of just they didn't care. They were their own like no one was competing against. I'm sorry, Final Fantasy 14 was not competing against anyone. They were only competing against themselves. Same thing with World of Warcraft. They weren't worried about anybody else. They were worried about just themselves making a good product, which you can kind of tell in their game. Like, they weren't worried about anybody else. They just kind of did their own. They were just worried about themselves. And also they weren't niche. I think that's another big one, is that they were just... they're, you know, making a really good game with a lot to do in it, you know, with all the way from crafting, gathering, you know, you can raid, you can PvP. There was so much to do in Final Fantasy 14 and World of Warcraft. And other games, it was very niche, is like you were only doing PvP, you're only doing PvE, you're only doing gathering, crafting. So
yeah, I think you're right that budget is part of it. Like, again, thinking of raiding, it's a spectacle. And in Final Fantasy, when a boss comes down and like maybe the guitar kicks in or something, like they don't mind making like custom music for boss fights and stuff like that. Like, it is something amazing to see. And you can make a really, really fun encounter that's pretty much just like a big ogre dude hitting you, but it's just not the same epic scale. It's not the sense of like, this is something.
By the way, watch any movie, and if you were to take sound and music away, or the sound editing away from a lot of movies and in games, like he's pointing out, it completely changes the entire tone and how you feel about things. You'd be amazed at how much sound and music plays a part on specific scenes, and especially you can see it in video games because you're interacting with it.
So yeah, budget's part of it. I also think the bigger games, and maybe the ones with the bigger budget, are just better at serving a broader audience. So say you make an MMO and you're like, hey, this MMO is PvP only because we think we can just make a better game if it's PvP. Well, you could probably guess there are going to be players that are like, well, I'm out. That's not me. Final Fantasy has a great like crafting game. It has a great social game. It lets you decorate your houses. So it serves players a lot of really different motivations.
Right. I don't know if you can answer this.
I rest my case.
But do you feel comfortable with the budget that you have for the Riot MMO?
Oh, that's actually a really interesting question. I think I can answer it.
Because they have like an unlimited budget. So they probably have a budget. They definitely have a budget. By the way, he'll probably go on to say this, MMOs have literally the biggest budget than most any other game, or any other genre. They are huge, which also MMOs are huge gambles because of the massive amount of money that is needed to put into those games. So yeah, they need a huge budget, and Riot definitely has that budget. But anyway,
one of the nice things about Riot is we're not going to run out of money, right? I'm not going to have a publisher that's like, hey, if you got to ship by Christmas or we're canceled. Riot will cancel this game if the game isn't good enough. They're not going to cancel the game because it gets too expensive. And those go.
What he just so Riot is batting 1,000 right now with their games. League of Legends, Valorant, what is it called? Teamfight Tactical, Wild Rift. Yeah, all their games are successful, and I said that in my first video that they're not going to invest money into an IP they don't think is going to give them good returns. So this kind of makes me beg the question is like with projectL, excuse me, with projectL coming out and working on an MMO, it makes you think like MMOs and fighting games are actually like they're not very popular genres. It makes me think like, what do they see that we don't? They wouldn't invest in something they don't think is going to, give them like a revenue stream. They want their returns on it. So it kind of makes you beg the question, like, do they feel resurgence in these genres? So yeah, that's a really good question. That's I want to hear what he has to say.
Go hand in hand. We could make a very expensive bad game, and then I would get fired. Right. We could make a less expensive game that
the gaming industry is insanely competitive. Like you make a bad game, you're not only are you fired, your reputation is completely demolished too. Like no one's going to want to hire you after that.
Still really captures hearts and minds, but it's not a blank check, right? Like I have to prove, and the team has to prove that whatever Riot is putting into it is worth it, because
right.
They could spend the money somewhere else. They could make a different game. They could double down on Valorant or something. So it's definitely not a blank check, but it's also not like we're not a startup where, oh gosh, we're out of money. What are we going to do? I can always go back and ask for more. Whether or not I get more is going to depend a lot on what they think how does the game look? What do playtesters say? How are we doing, about hitting our milestones? So that is how, in the very simplest sense, you can think of it as you get some money. If you spend it well, they're going to give you more. If you don't spend it well, you're probably done.
This makes me fall more in love with Riot. The fact that they're like, okay, how much do you need? Okay, we'll give you this much. And the guy comes and says, hey, all of my devs and my testers have said we need more for this. And they're like, okay. Like, yeah, that's great. And on top of that, like, I've heard like comic book artists say like daddy's on a deadline. He would have to tell his family that. Or I've actually talked to a developer at Ubisoft, and he was like, he was saying, a lot of the old Assassin's Creeds were insanely were rushed like crazy. And that's why a lot of the quality of the games fell off. Or like Mortal Kombat, back when they were with Midway, they would have to rush to get games going. So the fact that they're like they don't have an indefinite deadline, I'm sure they're probably like 5 years later, hey guys, you got to be working on something. But with this, he's like, hey, we're not going to push a deadline. We're going to give you the money that you need to make a good quality MMO that people are going to enjoy. That's fantastic. This is what game development's all about. Give us a good game. That's what we need.
And in our case, rather than shipping the bad game, it would just get shit canned.
That's awesome. But I think that distinction, I think, is massive. Not only from your perspective, but especially from the consumer's perspective. Like just knowing that, hey, this MMO that's coming out, it's like money isn't the issue. They'll cancel it if it's not good. So like even that, like just that notion, it's like If this MMO were to be canceled, I would be devastated. I'd be really disappointed. I think everyone in the MMO world would be, the MMO community would be pretty devastated that it got canceled. But at the same token,
it's giving me flashbacks to Project Titan and oh gosh, what was the other one? Ghost. Yeah, those were games that were canned, that everybody was kind of looking forward to at least seeing. I don't even know if they released what Titan was supposed to be. I don't know, but anyway.
Token, I think it would bring another level of respect and be like, hey man, at the end of the day, it wasn't a money thing. It just wasn't good enough. They just, maybe they'll revisit it later. You know, like I would have a lot of respect for a company that, you know, would cancel a game because of that, rather than the actual money that's going into it. That's really, yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. The disappointment from players, and I understand there'd be disappointment. I'd be disappointed. But that's coming from, oh, I had such high hopes for this game, and I'm disappointed that it didn't.
By the way, I just had to check something on OBS. I apologize about that.
Didn't get there, and
right.
They don't want a bad game. They don't want us to like ship the game no matter what. They want a good game, and that's absolutely. You know, we can't deliver a good game. What are we doing?
Absolutely, absolutely. So one of the things that the game does need to do is it needs to generate revenue. Okay.
Developers, start taking notes right now. That's what you got to think. Oh, we don't want to ship a game because, you know, every year we got a new game coming out. We have to have a new game next year. You know, make something. I don't care. Just send it. No, make a good game. Just take your time. Make a good game.
Okay, so I'd love to get your thoughts on the differences between, from your perspective, as the guy that needs to generate the revenue. Love to hear your thoughts on a sub-based model versus a free-to-play model.
You know, the truth is they're both viable. What you generally get in a sub-based model is fewer players, because fewer players can afford it, but are a very steady revenue stream. So you might say, I would rather 1 million players who pay me $15 a month regularly than 5 million players who sometimes pay and sometimes don't. That's just, you know, that's just the economics of it. So.
I personally like sub better, because when you have a steady revenue stream, you're always going to be putting money in the bank, and you're always going to have that money to, you know, to support the game. It's one of the biggest reasons I think one of the biggest reasons why World of Warcraft has done so well is because they kept the subscriptions. And I mean, if you make a good game, people are going to pay $15. $15 a month is not that much money, you know? I mean, plus it used to be $40. I think it's like 60 now, but it's like, what, $30, $40 for your expansion and $15. That's $15 a month is not that much money. So if you're paying $15 a month, like, you know, times 1 million subs, that's a lot of money to be putting to be turning back around and putting back into your game. So I actually like subscription based. It is a Riot game though, so I can imagine it being free to play. So I'll be interested into seeing what their MMO does, but I kind of hope it's sub based, but we'll see.
So generally, if you want to go free to play, it's because you think you can have a lot of players and you'll be,
or your game is failing.
Be okay even if they don't individually spend a lot of money. You'll have a lot of players who spend nothing. You'll have some players who spend more, but on average, you're assuming they're not going to pay that much, and you make up for it with size. And you see that in a lot of mobile games, not just mobile MMOs, but mobile games in general. Assume that they don't have very long a lifespan, so they need to like make money right away. You know, big audience right away, because then.
It's very true with mobile games, but also kind of what he said before about you know, free to play games and the cash. Like it kind of reminds me of Terra and Blade and Soul. I played both those games a lot, and they ended up turning into pretty much like costume MMOs because I think Terra at first was a sub base, then went free to play because it was losing players, and then it went to consoles. Blade and Soul is still it's still free to play, but it's like the game, all their revenue is basically from costumes in what's it called, baggage, your backpack expansions. Same thing with Star Wars, the Old Republic. So yeah, that's why I don't like the free to play because of that, I'd rather just pay the $15 a month and have a good quality game that way. But anyway,
and people are gonna drop them and move on to the next thing. It's also interesting that in China, a little less so Korea, but still more so I think than in the West, the notion of pay for power is not as, it's almost repulsive to a lot of Western players, because they're like, it comes to them as like, well, that's not fair. Like, why should that person have better gear than?
Fun fact, anybody play ArcAge? That's a pay to win game. Things are way different in Korea. He was talking about China, but it's like, if you can pay to have the most powerful thing, like, it's not really frowned upon there. ArcAge, I remember I didn't play it very much. I had two friends that played it a lot, and they were telling me one time about this guy he was like some club owner in Vegas, and he was a pay to win, and he bought all the best equipment, and then you go toe to toe with him in the Coliseum or whatever it was, and he was still doing, like, his movement was based on the WASD instead of using his mouse, and people are like, he was still mechanically, like, terrible at the game, but he had all this great equipment. So but anyway, I want to hear what he has to say about this.
When they just spent money on it.
Right.
But at least to a Chinese mindset, sometimes they're thinking, well, I don't want to spend a lot of time grinding to get this item. Why can't I just pay you to get it right away and get to the good stuff? Maybe I just want to raid. Let me skip to the good stuff. Particularly, this was more true in both Korea and China, when a lot of gamers had to play it at PC bongs or PC cafes, because then they're literally paying for the hour. So rather than paying per hour to get 100 hours to get a sword, let me just buy the sword and skip all that.
Yeah, but it's not as satisfying, though. I mean, when you work super hard to get that like, I have a friend who played, we played WoW together all the way since, he played in vanilla, and, or he was in a huge raiding guild in vanilla, and he actually had an orange piece, and the amount of time it took him to get that piece was insane. So yeah, it's just not, I mean, this might be just my American mind. It's like, it's so much more fulfilling to earn your gear and to put in that time perfecting your mechanics than just buying gear. That's just me.
We're not going to do pay to win. We're not going to do pay to power. I'm pretty confident saying that. What the business?
That's a big one.
I probably said that, or a lot of players.
I like how he just, like, fully explained what pay to win is, and then just goes on to say, "Oh, we're not going to do that."
It's just not Riot's style. Right. We really want players to feel like they're welcome back in the game at any time. And yeah, if life is rough right now and you're between jobs, or you just can't, you can't pay for the subscription, I'd rather them not churn out rather than be able to keep playing. So that's why Riot has traditionally liked free to play with purely cosmetic purchases. But again,
is that enough?
Yes, but it takes so much time to get good at League of Legends and Valorant, although they are free to play. And I can guarantee you, I probably put more money into skins in League of Legends than the amount of money I put into just buying games throughout my entire life. But he makes a valid point. I see what he's saying. However, the time it takes to actually become good at League of Legends is insane. So I get what he's saying. I do.
Though, because an MMO, again, I'm very ignorant to the game development and the budget side of things when it comes to MMO, but I would imagine that it's very expensive to maintain and run and create an MMORPG. Is it feasible? It's probably
the most expensive kind of game development.
Right? I would think so. Is it feasible to have
close is like huge open world, Horizon Zero Dawn, Assassin's Creed, Red Dead Redemption style. Those are also very expensive, but an MMO needs everything. It needs matchmaking. It needs a chat system. It needs, a gear system. It just, every system you can imagine. So yeah, they are very expensive to build. And if it's a super content heavy game, they're also very expensive to run.
Like, I don't know if you guys remember the game Rift. And on top of that, on top of MMOs, all the content you have to create, all the end game, like, all the things that need to be in the game. Excuse me. On top of that is also like, you had real time changing things. Same thing with like Guild Wars 2. You had like real time changing things. So yeah, it's brutal.
Absolutely.
If it's a more PvP based game or a more sandbox game, it's less expensive to run because players are providing a lot of the content.
Right, absolutely. Is it
the sandbox one actually surprises me because I figured it would take a lot more. Yes, like the players are changing, but doesn't it take a lot more stress on the servers when they're doing that? I don't know. Someone comment down below, tell me.
Is it feasible for a large scale MMO, like a big budget MMO, to sustain with a free to play model that just monetizes off of cosmetics? Honestly, because like for me, I'm thinking like, no. Like for me, on like technically, theoretically, yes. Obviously, if everyone is buying these costumes and stuff, yeah, sure. I know for a fact it would be, but like honestly, like realistically, I feel like the answer to that is no. What would you say?
No, we've done the math, and I think there is a world that works out. Like,
really?
You can have enough players who are willing to pay enough on cosmetics to fund a really big game.
Really? Like how?
Here's the problem with cosmetics. I agree with him. I fully agree with him because League of Legends is pretty much entirely paid for by skins and cosmetics. However, where I disagree in that was with cosmetics and MMOs are a little different because when I remember in the Burning Crusade, in World of Warcraft, the Burning Crusade, I remember a lot of the gear pieces. My main was a paladin, and a lot of the gear pieces in there looked insanely cool. They were really cool. But even if they didn't look cool, even if they didn't look that cool, let's just pretend they looked absolute garbage. But you had to, grind and work really hard and raid and do everything to get the gear pieces. The fact that I liked that they were they had a specific look to them, even if they were garbage, even if they looked garbage. The fact that they had all the stats, the fact that you worked really hard to get that and that you were wearing them, it made you feel very, like, it was very satisfying. And I remember seeing like some of the, what was it called? I totally forgot what the gear piece was called, but it was the paladin, the shoulder pieces that had the light radiating on. I thought they looked so sick, but I was like, how do I get those? But I didn't like when they started making it to where you can change the appearance of gear pieces. I didn't like that because I was like, even if they looked like crap, I still liked the fact that, that you got to show what you had and people got to look at that and be like, oh, you got those pieces. That's freaking sick. I want that guy in my raid. Or even just to you looking at it and be like, yeah, I got those. So that's how I feel about it. I don't like the ability to change appearance of gear pieces. That's just me, but yeah, let me know what you guys think. I don't like it.
How often would you expect, in order for that to work, how often would you expect to have to like release new cosmetics? Because obviously you can't release one new cosmetic a year to be able to, right? Like no one's going to buy, right? That's not enough money.
It has to be continuous.
And I also know from experience that players resent when they feel like you're spending too much development effort on cosmetics. Like to look at League of Legends, for example, if we stopped making champions and just kept making skins, at some point players are like, well, this kind of sucks. You're only focused on the money-making side of the game. So you need to do both. You need to make sure the game balance is good. You need to update everything that you can.
So throughout my entire life, I'm sorry, not my entire life, but in my previous career, before I changed careers, my boss, he's still my mentor till this day. But the point is that he would tell me, focus on becoming the best manager or the best supervisor that you can be, and the money will come later. And I feel like that that changed my whole perspective on things because I was so focused on like, I got a family, I gotta make money, I gotta, build my career. I'm thinking about things like, I was thinking about things like retirement and everything. And I was like, I'm not making enough money. And I mean, that's everybody right now, especially if you live in California. But he makes a really good point, which is that if developers just focused on making a good product, the money will come. If you build it, he will come. That's the from Field of Dreams. That's perfect. That's exactly what you need to think of. Like, build a good game and the money will come. Don't worry about how much money the game is going to make. Just make a good game. So
in order for players to feel good about it. So again, we don't even know for sure.
And that doesn't take away from the fact that money is important. You need to generate revenue. You have to. But it's like, we're just going to imagine if League of Legends just released like crap skins, and expected people, no one's going to buy them. You need to release good skins because that's how you generate revenue. So there is a balance to it, and trust me, I'm all for making money 100%. I'm very much in favor of developers making money, but when that's the ultimate goal is to make money. But if your focus is just making money, then you're not going to make a good game. Focus on making a good game and the money will come.
Exactly what our business model is going to be, but I've done the math enough to convince myself that if we said, can you launch a game with just cosmetics? Probably you can.
Okay, interesting. So obviously you just stated, as far as Riot MMO goes, there's no confirmation, there's none of that. But for you personally, as a gamer, what do you personally prefer? Do you personally?
I like how you said that, but it's like, at this point now, it's kind of just like, if they canned this, he was saying, Riot MMO confirmed. It's like, okay, it's confirmed that they're in development, but it could possibly be canned. It's like, at this point, it's like, you better release it,
prefer to play a sub-to-play game or a free-to-play game that has cash shop, that has an in-game cash shop?
Yeah, the one thing that bothers me about a sub is kind of the guilt of, I'm paying for this game and I'm not playing it right now.
Right.
And so for a game like World of Warcraft, I came back and played the last expansion. And then when I stopped playing, I felt like, well, the right thing to do is to cancel my subscription.
Right.
But then if I want to jump in and play one night, well, am I going to start my subscription up again? Like, there's a little more friction there to really fitting in how I play. Whereas, like, if I want to play Valorant, I'll just pick up Valorant. If I want to put Valorant down for 6 months and pick it up again, great, I'll do that. Now, there are battle passes and things like that can be subscription-like. But overall, I think that's the one flaw in the subscription model is, as a player, you feel like the right thing to do is to turn it on and off all the time.
Right.
Kind of a habit.
Right. What do you think about the games that are free to play but have like a subscription option where you get bonus stuff like extra loot drop percentage, extra experience, a lot of games do that. Like BDO does it, even Lost Ark does it to a certain extent. What do you think about that model?
It's a decent model. However, I still was not a fan of that. To be honest, I'm not a fan of battle passes. I would rather just be like Destiny 1 versus Destiny 2. I enjoyed Destiny 1 better. I enjoyed Destiny 1 more. I get the battle passes thing, and I think just the idea of expansions is kind of outdated, and everybody just does battle passes, and battle passes are kind of, the new expansions. But I feel like it has to be all or not. You know what I mean?
I think as a player, I think that's pretty cool because it gives you the option to kind of pay how you want. If you're like, hey, I'm not ready to commit money to this game, awesome. But if you're like, no, I'm in, I know I'm going to spend lots and lots of hours in this game, I don't mind, spending a little more for a better experience. I think that's pretty cool. It is, again, like I said before, with the pay for power, it's a slippery slope, and you can easily turn off players if you're too heavy-handed with that.
And I've played games to where it's like you had to pay the $30 a month, where you pay the $30 a month and you go into a different, it basically gave you access to different parts of the map that you couldn't gain access to like at all. So hey, thanks for sticking around. I really appreciate it, guys. After this interview, I'm even more excited about this, and actually I have a lot more respect for Riot Games. Based off of the things that he said, it sounds like the game is in great hands and that Riot is taking it seriously. Kind of begs the question also, like I was saying in the reaction, was that they're investing money into a fighter, projectL, and an MMO. These are two genres that currently aren't as popular as they used to be. So yeah, we can talk about that on a different video, but as always, comment down below, tell me what you guys think, and until next time, shred out.